Hey, it's Taryn Guy here, and welcome to episode 3 of Lucid Living. Today I wanted to share a blurb that I wrote a couple of years ago, and I actually shared this on social media a couple of times because it's one of my favorite references when I have to constantly remind myself how important and how necessary rebirth and transformation is. And not just the importance of it, but the importance of us acknowledging and accepting the process. Rebirth is scary, but necessary. When you're in the middle of a shift that will lead you to the next most important chapter in your life, it literally feels like being born again. There's comfort and warmth in the womb. Then it gets a little cramped and outgrown. As you grow, your perception is still limited because you know of no other place. Then labor begins. It's painful for the baby. It's stressful for the baby. It's a process with no steps skipped. The baby must endure all of it to get to the end of it. Once the baby is in the birth canal, it is only then when the light at the end of the tunnel is finally revealed to him. He must keep going or he will die. Now he is born, entered into a new world, a new purpose, a new space, a new understanding of himself. Different parts of our lives represent new wombs and new worlds. You must move forward to live and die and live again. I love to refer to the process of birth and metamorphosis, but this time around I'm going to talk about birth specifically. And it's very important because each step, each moment, each part of the process when it comes to being born is important. Each part of it, whether it's small, whether it's big, whether it's painful, whether it's easy, it's all important and it all makes sense. Now, again, as I said in the beginning of the blurb, in the middle of a shift, this is when we usually feel like we are in that birth canal because it's so hard, it's so stressful, but more than likely it is necessary change that we all go through in different aspects of our lives. Now, the easy part, we have a lot of easy parts of our lives, comfortable parts, and a lot of these are parts where I'm sure we've worked hard to get there, but once we've gotten there, we've gotten real comfortable. We've gotten real warm. We've gotten so warm and cozy that we don't want to move. So what happens is nature comes in, and nature begins the process of labor. That is exactly what happens. And that uterus, that warm womb that you call home, is now contracting and trying to squeeze you out and move you into the next home or next period of your life or next chapter. And of course, as we know, labor is inevitable. There's no way that baby can stay in there forever. It has to move on to the next part and the next chapter of its life. Now, when the uterus starts contracting and you start being pushed out, forced out, you start to question nature, you start to question God, because to your understanding, to your very simple and limited perception of understanding of what's happening, you have no idea why your safety net is now being pulled away from you. Sometimes you feel like you're being punished. And I'm sure that baby in that womb feels like it is the end of its life. Now, after that labor has begun, there is a point of acceptance that comes along with the pain. Now you've been feeling it for so long, for these amount of hours or minutes or days or months, whatever your situation is. You've been feeling it long enough to know that there's a point of acceptance. In order for all of this or any of this to make sense, for any of the pain to be worth anything, there has to be a sense of accepting what is. Now, beyond the point of acceptance, once we've finally surrendered to what is happening, we may not understand it, But what we do is we go with the flow of it. At least that's the nature, right? Sometimes we resist this. Sometimes we may want to go backwards and go back into that warm, comfy womb. Now it no longer exists. So when the rug has been pulled from underneath us, at this point, there is no other way to move but forward. Nothing can be skipped. There is no fast forward button. There is no shortcut to being born. You must get through all of the steps. So usually with that wave of acceptance and surrender that comes over, some people see that as weakness. It takes strength to do that. It takes strength to go with the flow. It's not easy to go with the flow, even though it should be, because flowing is easy and effortless. And it's in our nature to flow with nature, but unfortunately we live in a society that has taught us to do the opposite of what nature tells us to do. Now, in this point, in this blanket of strength that I call surrender and letting go and accepting, through the process of surrendering and letting go, this is where your endurance is built. This is where you are taking all of the punches. You are getting kicked in the ribs. Everything is against you because it feels unnatural. But the fact that you're flowing through it like a car going through a car wash says enough that there is a process, there is a journey, and that innately you understand that there is something happening. Nature doesn't hate you. Your mother's womb doesn't hate you. God doesn't hate you. But it's bringing you through to get to another point. And this is just the natural process. Now, here's the thing. If you quit in the middle of this process, you won't make it. There is no sort of kind of making it through. You're either going to make it or you're not. It's plain and simple. You do not survive. And then you'll have to go through this process all over again from the very beginning. From the very beginning, because it will come up again. Rebirth will happen again. It'll just have a different mask, a different face, a different costume, a different title. There's no way to avoid birth or rebirth or transformation. So a lot of us, maybe for those of you listening, maybe needing to understand that in general by having a bigger picture understanding of what that process is from an outward view, from a bigger view. It just helps you become more aware when you're in it. You know the signs, you know what it looks like, you know what transformation feels like. So as you begin to know what that natural process is more and more each time you go through it, it kind of sort of becomes easier because now you know. There's no hoping or wishing or wondering anymore. We know better. We've gone through so many things in our lives where we always thought the worst was going to happen. And guess what? Sometimes the worst actually did happen. But there was something that was connected to that worst part that made it better. And I say this, I've probably said this for the millionth time on different platforms, but I will say it again. It is my mantra. It is the only term that I refer to that keeps me moving forward when I want to question what's in front of me. And that is that life makes sense backwards. And if it always makes sense backwards, it has to make sense moving forward. Now, you've gotten to the light at the end of the tunnel. You are now born. Everything is new. This is a new world. It's cold. There are all of these strange people. There's a strange environment, something that you're just not used to. And now you kind of see yourself in a different light. You feel differently. There are senses that you have now that maybe you weren't using before, but now you're really using in a different way. So now you have a different view of yourself and of your new world. This is what happens when we finally get through the pain. We are welcomed with new purpose. We are new. We are not the same. This is just a new world to discover and to explore and to have fun and to live life and to find purpose and to do it all over again. Because that entering of your new self is worth every single piece or part of pain that you've endured through the birth process. As you begin to elevate and mature and on your journey, you start to appreciate your life more. Even through the trauma, you start to include your trauma in understanding who you are. Anytime you are having any question about the process, go literally, this is not figuratively, but literally go into nature. Go into nature and remind yourself, or get reminded, of how perfect nature is and how perfect God's process and creations are. Everything is perfect. Outside of us, around us, at least in our eyes view, because we're perfect as well. We are made perfectly. But we don't realize that because we forget that we are just characters in a movie. We're not, or we even forget that there is a movie. We think that this is all real. So then we walk around and we tell ourselves that we're not perfect. But we're made perfectly. We may not be perfect because we are on a journey. And a lot of that journey is correcting and exploring. So appreciate nature. If you haven't watched this already, I highly recommend that you watch the documentary I Am on Netflix. I Am. It is amazing. And it puts everything into perspective when you are in doubt of the process. I've been through things in my life where I shouldn't be here talking to you guys right now. I should totally be a statistic. But for some reason, the way that God spoke to me, I chose to listen. A lot of times, we are being spoken to, we are being led, but the power of choice, we don't listen and we resist. And then we put more power onto other people and their opinions. The most of what people fear is what other people think about their decisions and their lives. That's why public speaking is terrifying. It is damn near up there with death when it comes to the biggest fears of most people. It's public speaking. Why? Because it's not what's coming from inside of you. It's fear of what everything outside of you may think or feel or how they may react. Once we understand that there is a world within us that just makes way more sense, and that once we grasp that everything outside of us begins to make more sense, it gets easier. It gets way easier. Life is not supposed to be hard, actually. But there are moments where things may get uncomfortable. But it's up to us to transform that and to alchemize any situation and understand what that other side is for us. Most of the time, we make a decision to stay in the birth canal. And what that does is it causes us to be stillborn. So you've been forced out by nature, but your understanding is jaded now. You've allowed yourself to die. You've allowed yourself to become stagnant. Don't make the choice to stay stagnant. Remain aware and get through it. So I hope this helped. And I can talk about rebirth and transformation forever because it literally applies to every single part of what I've been through and what I'm currently going through. I'm currently being reborn in so many ways. But now that I have a bigger picture view of it all, it just helps me understand the process even more, because whether you understand the process or not, it still takes place. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you next episode. Lucid Living.